welcome to 100 Units. We got Carissa from Florida Realty Investment. She is the president and managing broker. Welcome on, Carissa. Could you give us a quick intro and who you are and your company?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Joe. Happy to be here today. My name is Carissa Lawhun. I'm the managing broker for Florida Realty Investments. Our company does both sales and management. We have about a 9-county footprint in Central Florida. We go all across the I-4 corridor and up and down on both sides. We have on our sales and leasing team, we have close to 1,000 licensed realtors. And we're doing this about 17 years at this point. So we come in old hats.
And how many doors under management you have now?
Around 1,200.
That's awesome. That is a great number.
Thank you.
All right, we'll just get right into the exciting questions. So what are the key factors that an investor should think about or consider when they're selecting a property management team? Sure.
I think experience, not just with property management, but experience managing multifamily properties is important. The size of the team, to be sure that they have enough manpower and resources to really, cover all aspects of management of your property. Local knowledge, and I think this doesn't just refer to knowledge of local rental markets, local regulations, or really market expertise, but also proximity. Are they close enough to your property to be a real presence, or do they have the ability to sit a staff member at your property specifically, and especially during certain phases sometimes that we call them projects with multifamily properties. I think you're looking for someone with a history, proven experience with tenant relations and skills. That means consistency with what they're offering and communicating to tenants. And then I think that you want to know their values. So do they value clear communication, transparency? Are they adaptable? Meaning, will they tailor their program to fit your individual needs if you ask them to, or have a specific concern or concerns in certain areas? Are they able to move and adapt quickly to shifts in the market? And can they react swiftly when there's legal or regulatory changes? Will they even know what they are when those come up? And finally, during your search, I think it would be very useful to review and understand the management company's policies up front. So this can mean collections policies, leasing policies, and don't be afraid to ask about the success rate of each of those so that you feel fully armed with all the knowledge that you need to move forward.
Some worthwhile tips. That's good stuff. What would you give for strategies that you found highly effective for retaining residents?
Well, I think that once you get them in the door, in the property, a lot has to do with maintenance and their satisfaction there. So regular maintenance, timely repairs, this can be done effectively by companies that have not a policy, for lack of a better word, but have experience doing regular interior and exterior inspections. Exterior inspections are easy, but interior, really requires a relationship and good communication with the tenants. But that's how you end up seeing things that need to be done and almost being able to react to fix things before the tenant even realizes they're wrong, or before they've even been bothered enough by it that they've complained. Other things, there's certain times and places where community events or complex events can be used. You want to foster a sense of belonging for the resident so that they feel like this is my place. I'm comfortable here. I'm safe here. I'm part of this community. Providing exceptional customer service, prompt responses to inquiries, again, particularly maintenance, but sometimes they have questions about their leases and Too often I hear that property management companies go dark and, takes tenants a long time to receive responses to the things that are important to them. Obviously, towards retention, having attractive amenities, the upkeep of those, offering perks, where appropriate to residents. Another thing that we found that works and has, application in certain situations is giving the tenant something. So this can be something like carpet cleaning, where normally, maybe that might be charged to them. I've small gifts, and everyone does this differently at move-in, but everyone does it differently. I mean, some companies do it in the form of, a resident satisfaction package or something. I've had an example where one property owner wanted to give 40-inch TVs away on move-in. So, giving them something can help with their satisfaction level. Things like, providing pest control for them at the time of renewal. Some multifamily properties already do that, but in most cases, our leases are written where, after 30 days, those are your pets. They're yours, and it's a responsibility. So offering them something, at the time that you're approaching them for renewal, saying, look, we'll be happy to do a pest control treatment for you. It feels like they're getting something, almost for free. We all like that.
How about, so you talked about maintenance and repair issues.
Right.
What are your best practices for handling those and making sure that, they're working out well for the residents and for the owner?
Some of the same things that I just mentioned with retention, but being proactive with maintenance is the best thing you can do. Again, a strategy for that are interior inspections, and those can be owner specific. We have some property owners that want us to be inside all the time, every week, know what's going on. And we have others that say, no, you're going to run off my tenants, so, don't do it at all. In which case, we tend to suggest at least twice a year, certainly at the time of renewal, because that might base your renewal decision. Prompt responses again, and responding to maintenance requests in, really clear and consistent communication. This can be, you can see strategies that we particularly use, such as having like a 24-hour emergency maintenance line. And this obviously doesn't only get used for emergencies. I mean, people who work, they get home and it's after hours and they pick up the phone and they call. That's the only time that they have to do it. But having like a real person that answers that makes the tenants feel heard, and also can help them in cases of emergency or things that don't have to become emergencies, like can troubleshoot, walk them through, the better way to use their apartment, almost. Having an online option for submitting maintenance requests or work orders is another. I personally believe that should not be the exclusive way that those types of requests are received, and often I see companies doing that, but it's really, really about aiming for kind of a hassle-free experience for your residents. And then lastly, I'd say having partnerships with reliable, reputable contractors, vendors, and ensuring that the residents are feeling the same as you do about those partnerships, or the same as the owner does, by doing surveys after work is completed. This can help if something that the tenant wanted to have addressed wasn't addressed, and it allows the opportunity to get back in there and take care of that prior to having them thinking about it for a while, stewing on it, and then making another complaint or something.
Well, now we'll talk about the owner's favorite part, making sure you get the maximum rent. So what are your tips on getting the competitive rent rates?
So thorough market research, your property management company should be capable of and doing regularly, monthly at least, in certain cases, meaning certain markets. And we've seen some recently where rental rates are changing so quickly that weekly, may be appropriate in those scenarios. your property management company should be assessing unique features of your property and determining what's the value proposition here. How does that best translate or speak to prospective applicants? Adjusting the rental rates then periodically based on local economic factors, and I mean in some cases micro local. Really knowing that market, close proximity to the property, lots of experience in the area helps. It helps you lessen your vacancy because blips in the local area won't mean that you're priced out or that you're underpriced and renting too quickly. And then I think that, and this is a tough one sometimes to explain to and get owners on board with, but there's a balance that you have to strike between your maximum returns in terms of rent prices and really attracting quality tenants, the type that you want and the type that will stay.
That little balance is important. If you don't mind talking a little bit about that, because there's a lot of hidden costs that you get when you're forcing the tenants to maximize like the very tippity tip top of what they can pay, and then you end up driving turnover, and that runs up, so can be significant for owners.
Absolutely. And there's strategies and ins and outs to that too, like what you call those things when you introduce those fees and charges. Unless you want them out, obviously not pricing them out completely on renewal. But I would like to talk about it more from the standpoint of attracting the type of tenants that you want. So there are certain things that we know from experience about tenants. If you are very low, you may fill up your property very quickly. But if you are the low cost leader, your tenant quality you're probably attracting people who can't rent anywhere else. You don't want that. They'll tear up your property. Can, obviously safety concerns and, concerns about crime and things. On the other side of that extreme, we find that when properties are priced very high, you're attracting people who have fantastic credit scores, but they won't renew because they're in the process of buying a house. That's their end goal. So there really is a balance to, who is your quality tenant? And you may be getting in the case I just said, extremely high rents, but you're going to turn those units every year. Or you may be, getting a lot of month-to-month requests, while their closing goes through or something like that. So there's a lot of cost obviously involved in that kind of thing as well. And your turn costs, your leasing costs, your vacancy, if any. So there's that balance between, what can I possibly get? What is it smart for me to get? What's my range?
So when you're out marketing and advertising, what are your best practices for finding these good quality residents?
Well, I think in terms of marketing and advertising for multifamily, I think you have to have a management company that will really take a look specifically at your property and assess the goals of it and the needs of that particular property and strategize something towards them. I mentioned earlier, and oftentimes when we have a new multifamily property come on board for management, they come on in the form of various projects. Maybe you have every owner has a different goal. So maybe you have a situation where you have a really high vacancy, and so we call that a lease up. In that case, your goal is to fill it up as quickly as you can, and to that end, maybe you want to introduce some move-in specials, or something. Other ones come with the project of they're kind of a fixer-upper. Maybe they have a lot of units that are down and have been down for a long time, or maybe they're operating on a really tight cash flow kind of budget. And in those cases, your property management company should be able to tailor their marketing strategy in such a way that you don't have to have a huge cash outlay in order to fill up the property. And ideally, maybe turn as you go and utilize something like a model unit as part of the marketing strategy. Signage, I think, is critical. It seems obvious, but I don't see everybody use it. Multifamily properties specifically generally have some kind of high visibility property. Use it. Put a sign out there. If signs are really not very costly, you could change the sign periodically if you want to suggest, new management or certain specials, or if you're really having trouble getting rid of your 1-bedroom units, or something, to prioritize those to the local community who already enjoys living in the area. Obviously, in the time that we live in, be everywhere online. You need a property management partner who has contracts and connections and everything with all of the big sites and all of the really little ones as well. You really just have to be everywhere. You should be able to, if your property is being properly advertised and marketed with a professional company, you should be able to type in the address of your property and on Google and literally see thousands of pages come back. Because that's how these things work. They, if you put properly positioned and have relationships with the right sites and web partners, then they're going to syndicate, just explode out there to every little one that you've never heard of. Another thing we found that's really important with marketing is minimizing the time between when a prospect submits an inquiry and when they're able to be shown the property, like see it. We do that specifically by having our system, when a prospect puts in an inquiry, it automatically assigns that inquiry to all of our leasing agents who are in that certain area right then. So that allows, whoever can get there first to contact that person and say, I can show it to you in 10 minutes. Because you got to catch these people when they have time, strike while the iron's hot kind of thing. And know that, again, because of the online world that we live in, most of them, if they are submitting an inquiry on your property, they're also doing the same thing on 20 other properties on Zillow or Trulia or apartments.com, maybe through 15 other different management companies. So having a management partner that can really quickly act on, thanks for your interest, let me get you inside the unit, is really critical. I think making the application process easy is another thing that we've really hit on over the course of time and worked to expand. This means usually there should be an online option, not only for submitting the application, but payment of any fees. But at the same time, not exclusively, just like the work order and the maintenance, there should be real people on hand to assist the tenant if there's any documents that need to be collected, if they're having trouble, they're not computer literate, as you find, certain older prospects sometimes to be. And so in our case, we have an entire staff member who is dedicated only to working with applicants. That is her whole day, screening and communicating with them multiple times, sometimes in the same day, in an effort to get them approved as quickly as possible, get them an answer and get their deposit paid. And then I think finally, networking with other local businesses is something that a lot of management companies don't think of or don't do. Certain properties offer unique value propositions for maybe the employees or customers of a nearby business. And in that case, you should be, rather than letting it happen accidentally, you should be proactive and form a relationship with that company where your properties are right in front of their base, right? Other areas, so that was more property specific. Certain areas maybe are largely driven by one large single employer. I'm thinking of specifically some areas out in Lake and Fulton County. And in those cases, the property management company should allow it not to be accidental. It should go talk to those employers and be in front of their employees, their prospective employees, they're the people that they are surrounded by. And another idea towards networking with local businesses is be a step, like know what nonprofits are out there, what first-time home buyer, for instance, programs, entities there are, and be a step on their, this is what you have to do before you can get assistance with us. Like, offer to provide, credit, his tenant ledgers, on-time payment history, or be a reference, on behalf of that tenant. And sometimes just being so cooperative and, and being in front of those types of nonprofits can mean that they'll put you in front of their folks.
No, I like that's really good. Not everything goes as planned. Sometimes we end up with little surprises and have complaints, or there's something to be resolved. What are your best practices for resolving particularly resident complaints or resident disputes in some cases?
Well, you couldn't be more correct. 17 years in this business, and every time I think I've seen it all, something falls out of the sky that I never could have imagined. But some of the ways, the strategies that we found to help resolve those disputes or handle complaints is to communicate your standards and expectations to your residents upfront. Do it at lease signing or before. We incorporate as part of our lease signing process and move-in process separate documents that everything in them is stated in the lease, but not all of your folks are going to read everything that they've signed in the lease. So we do that with a rent collection policy that is, a one-sheet bullet point. This is what we expect. They sign this. It requires a separate signature. It's not part of their lease. They sign this when they get the approval that their application's been approved before they pay their deposit. Another way that we do that is through a rules and regulations addendum that it requires, it's a separate signature from the lease. It is part of their lease agreement for the property, but it requires a second look because it takes another set of initials or signature. Also, I think like just almost emotional intelligence kind of factors that your property management company should be training their team on. Things like remain the mediator, be advocating for the tenant, if at all possible, while at the same time maintaining your fiduciary duty to your property owners. Active listening, empathetic communication, things that just, are good in the dealing with people, all different types of people in the world. Working towards finding common ground, on solutions for the tenant, providing the resident explanation and some transparency, even when the answer is no. Being able to explain to them why, helps them feel like they're more of a part, or they understand, they can understand the background and why it's better for them this way. And it's all part of maintaining really a harmonious living environment. The tenant should feel that the management is looking out for them. And, specifically if they see other residents misbehaving, or harming their quiet enjoyment, they need to see consistently rules that are applied uniformly, that are applied fairly. And it's important that where possible, residents see management to be on their side. Not all the time, obviously we work for the property owners and we have to reflect, their interests first and foremost, but management should never appear antagonistic, one-sided, any of those things that would create a loss of trust with the tenant. And finally, all members of your management team should be saying the same thing all the time. They should not be able to go to this person, to the leasing agent, maybe, and get one answer to the question. And then their site manager, they get something else. Or, you know, the maintenance worker who comes to their property gives them a different answer to the same. You know, what it really takes is a property management partner that has a strong history with the same policies, so that it's communicated from the top down and has been always, you know, to all of their team members. And in this way, you know, you can't really have a team member that messes up, because you're not changing policies back and forth. You're creating policies and training your team on things that you have learned over a long period of time. These are our best practices.
You were talking about policies specifically. One of the things I've seen, especially for people who self-manage, that's one of the, to me, big advantages of using a professional management company, is it keeps you in compliance with the laws and rules governing landlord-tenant law and property management law. What are your tips for those situations?
And this is such a good question, because we have seen such a huge example just this year in this respect, where we had an environment throughout Florida where all of these cities, counties, municipalities were starting to create their own guidelines, their own rules, tenant bill of rights, you know, some of them called them. And then we saw at the state level, the state come and say, nope, reverse all that. None of that is legal. But we are going to make some changes to the landlord tenant statute, right? So it's so important that your property management company stays updated on during the period that there's different local rules in every single city and town, all through what the changes to the statute, you know, that just went into effect 11 days ago in this case, where you really need someone who has connections for that information. The connections that are bringing it to your property management company, because there's just when you start bringing in regulations, you know, the amount could be endless, you know, of all these different rules and things. So in order to be compliant, you want the property management company or someone with them to really have relationships with local and legislative leaders, where, you know, as policies are being changed that might affect you, they find out, or they know who to ask if it doesn't come to them directly. Other people in the industry, knowing and having good relationships with, you know, managers and brokers of other property management companies, being in those situations can allow you to be more informed on, you know, what's coming down the pipeline, or, you know, what should be we worried about. And then even relationships, connections in related industries, developers, you know, real estate brokers, you know, that maybe aren't property management companies, planning and zoning officials, you know, kind of things like that. So that rather than just, you know, reading the updated statute when it comes out every July, you know, they're actually actively knowing what things are changing, even if it's in a very small local area nearby your property, to keep you compliant. I think you need a property management company that's willing to and has a process for the regular review and revision of policies and procedures, maybe that are no longer compliant or are not working. Property management partner that's providing ongoing training to their staff on all of these things. And, you know, when necessary, hopefully as a last resort, you know, a management company that has a partnership with legal professionals that they can access on your behalf. And I think that's all critical.
That's, yeah, following the law. And there is a ton of landlord tenant laws that must be followed, and it can be very expensive if you find out you are outside of those. So
particularly when we had a different set of rules in every county, every city. But, you know, it's not just landlord tenant law that they need to be in tune with, that there's licensing changes that sometimes, you know, range from local to state. There are rules regarding housing. Fair housing, obviously, specifically is federal, but you really need to know, and you need to know even what's afoot in terms of, if you have there's a tenant activist nearby your property, know what reviews may pop up about you, or what kind of campaign may be driven, against your property, and work towards preventing that, because, if you know, you can make changes and you can comply.
Speaking of compliance, what do y'all use, or what are your recommendations for screening and background checks before you bring a new resident in?
Obviously do them. We do see situations where owners are self-managing, where they go on gut. And I have found personally that that's terrible, terrible practice, or at least my gut. So we do all black and white. Every company in the world is going to tell you, or should be able to tell you, that they do background checks, that they do, in addition to background checks, income verification, rental history verification, employment, credit worthiness, those types of things. We take it a step further. And with a couple of those things, such as income, employment, rental history, we get third-party verification, where the tenant can't submit something, it's really them, and not their former landlord or not their employer. It's really, them or their friend. So that is all part of having, staff specifically assigned and dedicated to helping the prospect through this process, is being able to have time to go seek out those, I need to contact your employer directly, hear it directly from them. You can ask them, you can help, your former landlord or your last apartment complex, but know that I need the email to come from them, that kind of a thing. So that all goes to individual attention to applications. We also do records checks online with the clerks of court in every county that the prospect has listed on their rental history. Sorry, last 10 years rental history. And this includes, and so some people think this is odd, but this includes civil litigation that we're looking for, because in our opinion, someone who's always suing somebody, or maybe suing past landlords, is not your ideal tenant, even if they've never had an eviction, even if they have a good credit score, they have good income. You just don't want that kind of thing. Avoid the problems. There's enough prospects usually out there that you don't have to do that, and save yourself the expense. Another thing that we do that people sort of give me a weird eye when I tell them is, you have to sort of know, and this can only come really from experience, but know and identify who your possible problem applicants are before you rent to them, and don't rent to them. One of the ways that we do this is sometimes by profession. Certain professions we have found are not good tenants. Realtors are one of those. So there's, and in certain situations, certain professions aren't good tenants. So we look at that stuff, and we have, some of our own internal guidelines and rules that we apply with that. Property managers don't do it. They know everything. And they know where to complain. Obviously, you have to follow fair housing guidelines. Everyone does. And then just ensure that you have a reliable, really streamlined screening process in place that's easy for your applicant, quick for your applicant, so they're not sitting around waiting, and in the meantime they have a weekend to go out and look at other property. Be able to make quick decisions because you have, a set of parameters.
How long does that take to get a thumbs up or a thumbs down on your process?
So it should take 24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
And that is what we explain up front to all applicants. Certain things can delay it sometimes. Sometimes we have a prospect who is very slow at providing pay stubs, or something, or they have a past apartment complex that has no interest in, providing us verification. in that case, we work with them and we're in communication with them, letting them know this is all we're waiting for. You can go take this form, to your former property, to the leasing office, and just know that we need to get that back from them, not filled out by somebody else, and from you. So we engage them, to help streamline that and to speed it up, because quick approvals mean everything. Not only does it mean for the owner that you have approved applicants and people moving into your properties much quicker. It helps the applicant to not go out and search. You don't want to lose good tenants because they have too much time out there to look around. Just in general, it's something that you have to do in order to even be continuing to show the property. You need to quickly be able to deny that an application that's sitting on it, so that everyone knows it's available.
For communication, you've got two directions of communication. You're kind of the middle person, so a liaison between the property owner and the resident, and then some issues are only with the property. What are your recommendations, or what do you use for best practice for communicating with the owner? And then secondary on the other side with the residents?
Well, we do everything with the owners. It really can be based on their comfort level. Ideally, if we're doing an approval of something that maybe is very expensive, or maybe is sort of a new try, at something, a different strategy or different way of doing something, we like to have that over email or somehow in writing. But we will text, we will telephone call, really whatever the owner's comfort level is, that's what we'll do. Same thing really with tenants. We do have completely online streamlined processes for them to submit work order concerns, maintenance concerns. We also have that ability via telephone with our 24-hour phone line. They have their site manager, property manager's direct cell phone in most cases. Our software allows us to text and email with the residents, and it records every communication that we've had with them right there. So everyone's always on the same page. But there are certain things, especially with residents, that really we need in writing. Things like notices to vacate, payment arrangements, things like that we just won't do verbally. We maybe discuss it with them, and maybe even then go memorialize it in an email to them, so that it's in writing, but require that they reply.
What is happening in the industry right now as a whole? Like, what are the trends that you're seeing?
Oh, goodness. Well, the last couple of years, since we've had the COVID change, obviously, following that, we had just this huge ramp up in rental prices. I mean, you almost couldn't stay on top of the market. That's one of those situations where you had to be doing your market assessments weekly and raising prices. I mean, very strange dynamic we saw there. A lot of sight unseen applicants. Those are great. Our experience has taught us, though, that they must see the unit before they move in, or you're going to have nothing but headaches. So we saw that. Now we are starting to see that, particularly in some of the farther flung areas, farther away from our metro centers. We're starting to see not really just stabilization of those prices, but we're really starting to see a little bit of a decline. That's critical that your property management company be aware of, and on top of, to the week, what's happening in the general market in that way. Because what you don't want to do is overprice and then sit on the market for a couple of weeks before you realize that that's too high. And then when you're in a market that may be declining, albeit slowly at this point, you don't want to chase the market down, so then your first rent reduction is still maybe $50 or $100 above what the market is. And by the time you're ready to reduce from there, it's gone down even further, so you don't want to chase it down, because it's going to result in longer vacancy and lower rental rates. You really need, somebody who's accurate and in assessing what's going on in that capacity. Other trends that we've seen, the one I mentioned with the tenant bills of rights, and the local city county, regulations, just navigating that landscape and staying on top of that. You really need a professional property management partner probably to do that. And then also, a partner that's staying abreast of, okay, well, what is the solution to that? Is there going to be a solution to that? And what happened and when it changed, those kinds of things. So those have been some pretty significant, maybe not market changes as we think of them in terms of supply and demand and rates, but definitely in terms of landscape and in terms of complaints and fines that are some of them still are out there that your local city or county may be able to charge to you and assess in the same way, almost like as a code enforcement violation, where they can lien the property, and all of that can be avoided if your property manager knows what they're supposed to be doing and they're staying on top of that stuff. I think those are the biggest like landscape and market changes that we've really seen. I'm happy to speak to something else, if you specifically want to talk about something.
That's interesting. So you're starting to get pushback on rents. So I mean, it's starting to, you're starting to see, hey, you need to drop the rents in order to get it full. Where before it was the opposite. It was just up every single month after month after month.
We went through an environment where we could push renewals, $300, $400, $500, $600, year over year. And we probably had that environment for close to 2 years. We started seeing it initially. And again, I'm not seeing it so much in the metro centers yet. But we started seeing in some of our farther flung communities, smaller areas, pushback on renewals. Used to be that a tenant would cuss you out and swear and I'm going to move, and then they'd go out that first weekend and look around and they'd be like, oh, I'll take it, right? Because there's nothing else. There was, everything else is so expensive too. But we started seeing it on the renewals initially, where more people were not having that experience when they went out that first weekend, and so we saw that and reacted to it very quickly. It didn't translate really to new applicants and new move-ins until a little more recently. That is something probably in the last 3 to 4 weeks we're starting to see, and again only in certain areas. And you want to be positioned so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you're chasing the market down, like I said, because it's very easy to have happen in an environment like this.
What do you find are good enticements or interest getters for residents when you're in that situation and they're asking for a lower rent or they're interested, they're on the edge? You don't have a lot of tips for like, hey, what helps push residents over to go ahead and move in?
Well, we rely strongly first on our people. Not just site managers, but licensed leasing agents who are providing, a sales component to a showing, not just here's the property or here's our floor plan. Somebody who really has a stake or a dog in the hunt on whether or not this person leases this property. Another thing that we do is we work with owners, to provide move-in specials where they're possible, and they can be creative move-in specials. They don't all have to be, I'm going to give you free stuff or free deposit or discounted deposit or free rent. It doesn't have to be like that. We have created strategies in certain cases around when the majority of people are getting their tax refunds, and made a really big push during that, around that. We've done marketing strategies around specific properties where, we knew that most of our traffic was going to be coming from those who already locally live in the area. And we've done weekend, hot dog, barbecue grill outs where they can fill out an application right there on site. So you can offer other things. And I really think too that it's not always necessary that you give something or you provide something special. Again, that very quick response time between inquiry to showing the unit to approval of application is critical. And that will get you farther than you can believe, most of the time, because often what you're competing with are people who are not as fast.
Speed of response makes a surprising difference, because you're exactly right. They're clicking on yours and saying, I'm interested in your property. And then 1 second later, they're scrolling to the next one and clicking on that one.
Yeah, but it's also about being on their timeline, so somebody who submits an inquiry, one afternoon, and a few hours goes by, and by the time somebody reaches out to them, I mean, everyone, see these automatic responders, this kind of stuff all the time, but those aren't tangible responses. And by the time somebody reaches out to them, it's a few hours later, and now they're at work, or something. And the next time they have time to get back to this particular topic in their lives, they forgot about your unit. They're doing a whole new search online. So it really, that speed of, having people in the area that can say, meet you in 15 minutes, or here we have somebody on site, it's going to be here all day, every day this week, 9 to 6 or something, really allows them, a prospect, to be able to see a unit and move forward on it on their timeline, rather than you're catching them, following up with them, goading them, chasing them, sort of.
Do you have any closing tips or anything you would want to make sure multifamily investors know as they're going down the road of property management selection?
Yeah, I would say, and maybe less in selection than in building an initial relationship with your property management company. I would suggest, obviously, building trust, right away. They should be working at that harder than you. But viewing the relationship as a partnership, realizing that if you're always hearing what you want to hear, may not be very accurate or correct. Familiarizing yourself with their policies, their procedures, their leases, their management agreements, so that ahead of time this is going to be the answer. If a resident asks this, or on the flip side, you see if something maybe you don't feel like it fits you or it doesn't fit your property, and you can ask for some kind of customization. They should be able to do those things for you. I would suggest that one of the most important aspects to that is to ask for and communicate to the management company the kind of reporting that you expect. So every management company is going to have some standard, written monthly statement or something, right? But if you know that you want to also see a rent roll, or you want to also see, performance or projection, numbers, or that you work really well in QuickBooks, and if they can provide you something specific in a certain format in Excel, you can upload it. Those types of things. I mean, setting that up front and knowing what you're expecting to see, making sure that you get it, is going to create a lot of transparency for a property owner right away into what's working and what's not. And they should feel confident asking for that. Most management companies that are worth their salt should be able to provide it. I think clear communication as well, and this may be phone call or email, but one strategy that I've seen a lot of very savvy property owners use is requesting a weekly or some kind of frequency conference call with their site manager or the leasing manager, if they want to be that involved, and keep their, finger on the button, so to speak. Maybe requesting quarterly assessments of financials or property performance with higher up, at your management company. I think these are all strategies that will make your relationship very effective and probably work for both of you better.
Well, thanks for taking time to share all your insights. I appreciate it, Carissa. Thank you very much. And if we need to, if anyone needs to get a hold of Carissa, we have her contact information at 100use.com vendors list. She's under the property managements tab right there. If you need to get a hold of her. And then is there any closing words you want to leave everybody with?
I just wish everyone success in their property management journey. There's, like you said, there's always something new and different happening. So it's an exciting world. And I appreciate you taking the time, Joe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My pleasure. All right. Have a great one.
Thanks, you too.